Brooke Schofield and things we need to think about. When I say we, I'm particularly speaking to young women my age, which I am 27, or like in my age group. But this is also lessons for everybody. But I'm saying this in light of Brooke Schofield because I basically watched this situation happen and I kind of knew something like this might happen, right? And so for me, seeing the backlash that she's going through now and what she's dealing with, it's kind of like when I saw what she was doing before, I was kind of thinking you might want to... Anyways, I'll explain for those of you who don't know what's going on so that we can just get the helpful wisdom that we can of the situation. Basically, so Brooke Schofield is on a podcast with Tana Mongeau. I watch their podcast. It's called Cancelled Podcast. And I watch the podcast because I find it really interesting to observe just like the things that they talk about, the guests that they have, their perspectives, because they're like around my age group. And let's just say we think very differently, right? And particularly Brooke, for me, is somebody that I severely do not relate to as far as how she conducts herself, right? So all that happened, to put everything into very short terms, right? Because the thing is, when you go to expose somebody, you're also exposing yourself. If something becomes a huge story, then, or you're out there known to be calling out people for things and holding them accountable for things, you better be prepared that if there's anything in your past that you got to be held accountable for, that you've thought about that as well before you boldly go and start calling people out. And that's basically what's happened with her, because a whole bunch of tweets have come up, which some people feel were racist, that she did when she was a teenager, you know, the usual. And she was making jokes about the whole Trayvon Martin thing. And if you don't know, it was a young man who was shot, and it's a whole big deal. And yeah, there's a whole uproar now because people are like, we need to cancel her, which is the irony because their podcast is called Cancelled. And what I want to say about this is there's a lot to unpack here. I'm going to do a separate video talking about whether people should be held accountable for tweets and messages and things that they did in the past, because I have a different opinion to, I think, what a lot of other people have. But for now, when she was talking about all of this Clinton Kane stuff, she ended up eventually doing like it was like a 15 or 21 video series on TikTok, right? Which again, I find it funny that people are doing these 21 like series TikTok. So basically you made a 21-minute video, but you did it in separate clips. Because why? Because that's, I don't know, I just think we're in a weird society. Like you could have just like, everybody's doing these breakdown things on TikTok, and I'm like, so we just can't handle long form content. We just don't like the idea of looking at something that says a certain amount of time. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that. That's just besides the point. Anyways, so she ended up doing an expose. Now, as somebody who watches the podcast, I'm going to say something that a lot of people might not know. I'm going to inform people of something that everybody might not know. She initially didn't want to expose this Clinton Kane individual. And just to explain who this guy is, I can't remember if I said this just now or not, but he basically has lied about a lot of stuff. He was putting on a fake Australian accent. He told her his mum died and whatever. They were in a relationship together for X amount of time. And then they broke up. Eventually, I can't remember exactly how it came to being. I think she talked about him without directing it towards him. And due to other people pushing and kind of enforcing the situation to come up, she then ended up having to share her story. And then it got messy. And then that's when the whole TikTok series thing came out and she exposed him. So I do want to say that in the case of Clinton in particular, I don't feel like she specifically was trying to expose him, because she was actually trying to protect him, because she was worried about what would happen if she told everybody, like what would happen to him or what he would do to himself, etc. But we must take into account the fact that her and Tana, both on their show and particularly in their live shows, which is where a lot of the new information has come out, have exposed a lot of people. And there's this notion, which again, I attribute to a phrase that I've heard the Swifties like to use. If you don't want to, like towards, you know, men out there, like if you don't want to be called a bad guy, don't do bad things. You know what I'm saying? This whole like, you know, if you're catching the vibe of what's coming behind all of that, I think you'll get it. So what I want to say here is that when she was talking about, sometimes when I hear her and others, but we'll specifically talk about her because I'm using her as an example. Nothing against the girl, not saying anybody, not sending hate towards her, not like judging her, but I am just saying that as an observer, the attitude in which she has historically gone hard on others for things that they've done, it kind of, for me, it didn't always sit right, because sometimes for me, there's like a difference between saying the truth. I'm not going to say your truth or their truth, because there's just the truth. There's no my truth, your truth. There's just the truth. So the facts are the facts, right? So saying the facts of what happened and saying how it made you feel or whatever is absolutely fine. Where we start to have a problem, and this is something that I'm saying you need to think about if you're going to be exposing somebody, is when you start to have like an energy where you kind of see yourself as better than the person you're exposing. I always say to you guys on this channel, for those of you who've been here for a long time, that we've all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. That's why even the people that have hurt me, I share the stuff that's happened, as little about them specifically as possible, but enough ideally to be able to at least, you know, be able to talk about my own pain, because I shouldn't have to suffer in silence. I shouldn't have to keep everything to myself, because at the end of the day, if you did something, you did something. That's not my fault. I'm not trying to, just because I'm speaking on what I need to speak on in order to gain my own healing and to have my own voice, doesn't mean I'm going on a smear campaign, right? But at the same time, I'm always clear to say to you guys that, like, I'm not better than them and I'm not better than anybody. I've made a different choice and they've just made the choice that they want to make. But realistically, we all can make the same choices, right? And the reason why I say that is because I'm also obviously going to be the villain in some people's story. I've obviously made my own mistakes. I've obviously hurt people who are going to, who you know, I'm not perfect either. I'm not in a place to sit as some kind of higher level to be judging others. And I guess that's what I'm trying to say here. Like, a lot of the times when I hear Brooke talking about people, or especially like the guys, and she's one of those that I said to you guys falls into this trap that a lot of young ladies are into these days. They're like having a new ex every like couple months or whatever, and like somehow feeling like completely heartbroken, even though you only knew somebody for like a couple of months and all. And I mean, this is again why there's the dangers of, like I was saying in my previous videos, I was like, this is why, you know, the Lord tells us certain things. It's not that he's trying to ruin our fun or try to be tyrannical. He's like, listen, you're the one who's going to get hurt in the long run. And so instead of us realizing that, and again, taking accountability and realizing it, we're now projecting our feelings onto God and saying he wants to control us. And then what ends up happening is we just now don't trust straight men, because that's the problem now, isn't it? Straight men are becoming the problem. As far as a lot of young women my age, because of engaging with them casually, gaining all these emotions, being broken up with or left or whatever, feeling completely heartbroken. But that's kind of a you problem, right? And again, this is what I'm saying with the exposés, because I'm like, you're exposing these people and exposing these guys and exposing whoever, but you got to recognize that there's also stuff that you, first of all, I just wanted to touch on that just to mention that there's a level of delusion to that. But even more so, if you are exposing somebody for something that they have actually done, yeah, people might also find skeletons in your closet. And I don't know who went looking for the tweets, again, because of watching not from watching the podcast. Yeah, I can't remember, but somehow I knew that she'd addressed these tweets previously because somebody brought it up on Reddit, but she addressed it also on Reddit. And yeah, and so now people are a little bit disappointed with her apologies, saying she's now going to have lost some fans that will never recover, because they're like, they can't believe that she said that. She was 16, 17, which we'll talk about that all in a separate video, about how I feel about this whole old messages and old texts malarkey, because I think there's a lot of things that if people can get out of their feelings for a moment, I think we need to have like a serious conversation about that. But having said that, I just wanted to say that, like, you got to be careful in life when you're exposing people, especially the way in which you're exposing them. Talking about your pain, talking about your struggles, talking about your things that you've been through is one thing, right? Taking some level of pride in exposing somebody else when we have skeletons in our own closet. Like, that's why Jesus says in the Bible, he who is without sin cast the first stone. You know, when the guys who were throwing the stones, because there was a woman caught in adultery, I think, and according to the laws in the land, there was a right to actually stone her for what she had done legally, right? But Jesus was trying to make the point of that, like, he who is without sin, like, who are you to sit on your high horse of self-righteousness? And that's exactly what I'm saying here. Like, yes, speak your truth, share your story. You deserve to be able to heal. You deserve to have a voice. But also remember that if you're going to sit on your high horse of self-righteousness, you don't really have one to sit on. And none of us do. None of us are perfect. None of us get everything right. None of us have gotten everything right. So we have to keep these things in mind when we are sharing stories. And I just wanted to throw that out there because there's a lot of like really bold people, and I'm particularly mentioning my own age group just because I've noticed it and I can see it becoming a serious issue in the long run if we don't like nip this in the bud early. There's like a serious issue with just like exposing people and like feeling better than them, being like, oh, they're like this, especially with this whole us being against the straight man thing and like how straight men are the problem. And it's like, when we're behaving like this, also I'm just going to go ahead and throw out there as a potential hypothesis that if I was a good guy, a guy that actually would love a woman well and would respect her and stuff, and I saw a woman doing something like this, I'm going to be less inclined to want to be interested in her just because any old expose could come out. Just like I said to you guys the other day about the girl who was all over TikTok talking about, oh my gosh, I caught my boyfriend cheating on me on TikTok or whatever. And then it turns out that first of all, they were just dating. And he had told her very clearly from the beginning that he didn't want anything serious with her at all. And then she herself decided, oh, but because we've spent so much time together, I just felt like maybe things had changed, even though he never said that. But you've already gone on an expose now. So it's just not a good look. Do you see what I'm saying? It's not a good look either. So I'm just going to throw that in there as well. But that's all I had to say about that. I just wanted to say that we need to be really careful as people in jumping on these exposés, because we also have skeletons in our own closet. We also have things that we've done. We also have stories in which we are the villains. And that's why, yes, speak your truth. Say what you got to say. You deserve to have a voice. But also be careful. Don't sit on your high horse of self-righteousness because you don't have a right to. So that's all I've got to say on that note anyways. If life's a game, let's play to win. Subscribe if this is your first time or watching my videos. Oh my gosh, why am I forgetting my whole things that I got to say at the end of this video? God bless you. God loves you. I love you. I've got more videos coming out today. Another video about Brooke. I'm going to be talking about Hailey Bieber. I've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. So stay tuned, everybody. Love you all. And I'll see you in my next one.